I'm Angela Glyn Davis, but my maiden name is Salisbury. That's how I'm connected to the Salisbury family, because my father was a Salisbury. And I'm 84, and I'm related to Frank Salisbury, Uncle Frank, as he was known for our family, because he was the next brother down from my grandfather. Well, there were 12 of them, but one brother died when he was 2, and another died when he was 26 or something like that, I think. Anyway, in his 20s. But so the one that died was between my grandfather and Frank. And then there was another brother. He's called Eustace on the family tree, but my dad always called him Uncle Jack. I never met him because he must have been 40-something when he died. Frank and Uncle Jack, they were near together in age and very close as well, and apparently. But Uncle Jack had 4 children, so my dad and them were sort of the same ages, and there were loads of cousins, of course. And then there's 2 more sisters after that who were younger, and I knew them really well. One was in Harpenden, and their children were my dad's first cousins, but I knew them really well, and their kids, because they were all Harpenden ones. So that's how I'm related to Uncle Frank, and also the very many children of their children and the children's children. So there's a lot of us. Because they were a very big Harpenden family, they did influence, and their father was very, very influential, and he was a very strong Methodist. They had a very little church, and he got that one that's now on Harpenden High Street. That was all him that got that. That's why the windows in there are dedicated to him, the ones that Frank designed. And also, he was on the town council and the various other things. So, and I think some of the others were as well. So it was kind of quite a important family. I think everybody must have known the Salisbury family because of that. But my father has a plaque in Harpenden as well for his services to the Harpenden town sort of thing.
Frank was born really not very well, wasn't he?
Yes, I don't know what was the matter with him, because you read about it, and he was a poorly child and wasn't able to go to school or anything. One of his older sisters taught him a bit, and later in his life he really enjoyed reading. Yes, he was poorly, and he went to school a tiny bit when he was older, but I think he missed half of that as well. So he didn't really have much schooling. His oldest brother had a place making stained glass in St Albans. I think he was only 15 when he said, "Come and work with me," and that's where he developed his talent, really, because eventually he was allowed to design some of the designs, and his brother realised he'd got talent and then tried to get him into art school. I think he eventually got a scholarship to the Royal Academy, because they wouldn't have been able to afford to pay for him. There's 4 in the Methodist Church, and also he designed one for that house called Red Gables, which is in the Rothamsted Laboratories area. That he did a stained glass window for that too. He put that in his own house, sort of thing. I know that's what he really liked, because that was the only way he could do his own artistry. Everything else, he had to do what he saw exactly and do it a beautiful portrait. Okay, he could paint it nicely, but it wasn't his idea. But his stained glass, of which he did many all over the world, in quite big places, he designed it. That was his art. He did paint some landscapes and things like that, but I did get one for a wedding present, and it was awful. It was only a little one like this, and I didn't like it. I lost it quite quickly. Because there was a house there belonging to a Dr. Kingston. And so Frank's father bought the house, knocked it down, and built the one that's there now. And for a time, because they had a small shop where the Inn on the Green was, they moved to there, and they lived above. And I'm pretty sure my grandfather lived above for a bit. And he then ran it when his father died, or when he took over it, and then my dad took over it from his father. It was a very big store, a beautiful one. They had all white goods, they used to call them, and things like that downstairs, And then my dad opened up the stairs, and upstairs they had a Chinaman influence, the town, I suppose. Well, the village, as we all called it. Yeah. It's only recently turned into a town. New people call it a town. Uncle Jack, who was the next down from Frank, he designed a lot of houses in Harpenden, and one of his sisters lived in one that is still there, beautiful one on East Common. His younger sister, Cicely she's called, but we called her Auntie Cis, and they lived in there all their lives until they were too old. They both died well up in their 90s. They had their platinum wedding anniversary even, and their children were in Harpenden as well, and I knew them really well, and so on. We used to go on holiday always with one of them. So yes, he designed a lot there, and another road, particularly Salty Avenue, but that's, a lot of those houses have been pulled down now, but they're very recognisable because he designed them with timber and pretty bricks and things, so he designed them with timber and pretty bricks and things, so they were easily recognisable. He had 4 children. He had his studio at the back of his father's house, parents' house to start with. Then he had a smaller house. Then he moved, he and his Uncle Jack built the house that we're going to take some pictures of as well, which is by Rothamsted Laboratories, just there. They built that, and he had his studio there, and he had a lot of people come to sit there. And it was from there they moved. He moved to London because I think the sitters had to come down by train, people who wanted their portraits done, and sometimes the train didn't arrive, or it was held up or something. And I think he decided he needed to move to London so that it was easier for people who were coming to sit for their portraits to get to him. I think his Uncle Jack's, the son that was an architect, I think he designed the house on Hampstead Heath. I'm pretty sure. I think I've read that somewhere. And unfortunately that uncle died quite a long time ago. Well, he was the same age as my dad. It was one of the funerals we went to, which was a family occasion again. He designed that Sarum Chase house.
When you went to his house, what do you remember about that occasion?
Oh yeah, it was, well, enormous amount of family, and Auntie Sue, whose 90th birthday it was, who was one of the older ones of the family, it was her birthday, and we knew her really well. Auntie Sue was lovely. She was very religious. She never married, and she used to come to our house a lot when we were kids. She was a very bright, very well read, very intelligent lady, and had lots of stories and things like that, but you just had to be very careful how you behaved and what you said. So my parents always warned us to be careful because she would give us a lecture otherwise. I've no idea why he held her 90th birthday at his house, Sarum Chase. I was only a teenager, I have no idea who organised it all. But it was nice to go to the house. There's one room where there's like a sort of gallery, and you look down on the studio because the studio was 2 floors. And if you ever drive past the house, you can see this vast window that goes from top to bottom. So you could look down, and we were also allowed to go into the studio with my cousins who were my sort of age. We were looking at his autograph book, and we could see that there was the Queen, Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, which is the ones we remember, of course, because, you know, they were important ones. There were lots of others, but I can't think what they were. That was the only occasion we ever went there, and then the next occasion when the family were all like that was at his funeral, which was in Harpenden.
Can you remember anything else about the house?
Well, not really. It was just terribly grand. I mean, as a teenager, how much do you take in? I just remember this big room and this gallery that you could look down to the...
Tell me anything about what Frank Salisbury was like as a person.
Well,
can you
not really, because it's only from hearsay, you know, from what the others said. They liked him, but he was quite distant. He was so busy, he never stopped, and half the time he wasn't in the country. I don't know who he was friends with. The brother that he was really, really close to, He died when he was in his 40s, you see. That was the one below him. I've never met him, because he died before I was born, I think, but my dad always called him Uncle Jack. So it's very difficult to tell you what he was like when I saw him very little, and I can only go on what the others say. I know he was always very smartly dressed, very artistically dressed, because he used to wear long, sort of velvet type jacket things, but quite long, you know, down to just above his knees, and these beautiful big silk cravats. So I don't know, he's got a self-portrait, and I think that's what he's probably wearing in his self-portrait. That's all I can tell you about that.
So kind of Oscar Wilde type jacket with...
Well, I suppose so, yes. I mean, obviously, you know, his prominence was probably in the 30s, and that was a little bit of the fashion for gentlemen of standing, sort of thing. My grandmother was lovely. My grandfather, as I said, was quite severe, and I mean, we never really got to know him. My brothers say the same thing, but my grandmother was lovely, and my grandfather died when I was in my teens, but she lived to be 88 and was as fit as a fiddle till the minute she had a heart attack. And she was lovely, very lively, and just a fun, very kind, nice person to be with, and very attractive. The painting that Frank did of her, I don't know particularly why he picked her, but because he did a lot of his wife and children, but she is very attractive in this picture, which I'm hoping to get hold of. Well, my brother says I can have it, so he's only looking after it for me. My dad left it to me because he knew I loved it. Excuse me.
You mentioned that you went to his funeral.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
That was in the Methodist church. They had a little girl that died, I think, I don't know how old she was, but very little. So, and she was buried in St Nick's, and I think his wife was too. His wife came from St Albans originally. I think she was a much higher class family than him. So he wanted to be buried in the same grave. The police knew that he was going to be taken there, and they actually stopped the traffic so that he could be carried all the way from the Methodist church along the High Street and then across the church green into St Nick's churchyard. But the women weren't allowed to go to the burial. I've no idea why, but we didn't. And we went, but we all met at Uncle Jack's daughter. He had one daughter, the oldest one, and then three more sons. And they lived in Harpenden. Well, you wouldn't know the road, but it's right at the top of Clarence Road, the higher up bit. And they had a big house up there, and we all went back there afterwards and just had a massive party and slightly forgot about poor old Uncle Frank. Just thought how lovely it was that we'd all got together, which has happened on many occasions since, I have to say, when we've all gathered for one of the family funerals. I don't actually remember anything about the service at all, but I was there, and so were masses of others of the family. But it was the event of him being, you know, we all came out, and then the police stopped the traffic, and then you can imagine how slowly it was to carry his coffin across and all the way to St Nick's, yeah. And then, as I say, the men went to the burial. Unfortunately, I think he was majorly forgotten about, and forgotten about by, you know, a lot of people. Probably his portrait painting, how he painted it, which I know he liked to paint absolutely straight from life, and it was getting into the thing where people were painting more sort of caricature-y and things like that, you know, so it wasn't necessarily exactly how the person looked. And so his sort of era of very formal, majestic type portraits were probably had moved on as well. I was watching Antiques Roadshow quite a long time ago, and one of his paintings was on there. It wasn't worth a huge amount, I have to say, and I know some have been sold at Sotheby's or Christie's, and they haven't been hugely valuable either. So I don't suppose the portrait of my grandmother will be very valuable, but it is a very nice portrait, so I'll be happy to have it. He really didn't like the way art was going, but he was a traditionalist.